special one.
That just makes my day. Good evening. Welcome to CGTN Live. Now you're watching CGTN at the Table. And this is a special program which is set for the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. That is 2 days away. So before this huge thing, we can set a sidebar program to talk about it, but it's not happened yet. But still, I wonder what you might be interested in it is to find out what this summit is going to be about, because China has invited more than 50 countries, the state leaders, to visit China, and they're going to attend a meeting within 2 days. So the schedule must be very tight, and what they're going to talk about. And although we don't have the agenda yet, but we can make a guess based on the information we collect at the CGTN headquarters. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that alone. But before we move on with the program, I need to give you some information about this program. We are live on CGTN's social media account, so that means you can find us on all CGTN social media accounts, including Facebook, including microblog, as well as Twitter and YouTube. And also you can download our applications and find us there. Also, if anything is we're going to say in this program that you are interested in, please feel free to leave your comments in the comment section of all those platforms. Okay, now I'm going to introduce the two guests that joined me today. I have Wei Wei here. She is one of the best reporters, and she has been to Africa.
Yeah,
and
nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a few questions about her experience in Africa, and they're going to give us some ideas about what African people need from China and what China is going to provide them with, and the cooperation between the two sides. And also, I'm having a host from a Nairobi office. Lindy, would you mind introducing yourself to our guests?
Sure. I'm Lindy Mtongana from the Nairobi office. I'm a news anchor and reporter, and it's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have both of you here. I'd like to start with you, Wei Wei, because you've been there, and we have more than 50 state leaders from Africa coming to China, and they're talking about the big stuff. So in your opinion, what are those big stuff are going to be?
Well, before answering this question, I want to tell you that in June, we paid a visit. We traveled to Africa for 1 month. And we visited 5 different countries like Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania. This is in East Africa, and also in West Africa, we went to Nigeria and Ghana. And during our stay there, we visited a lot of local people and a lot of Chinese companies over there. So in terms of your question, what do they need most from China? I think it must be trade and investment opportunities. And by saying this, I mean 2 sectors. First, they need Chinese investment in Africa. Actually, we visited a lot of companies. Most of them are
Chinese companies. Or?
Chinese companies, yes. They set up their bureaus in Africa and to build many infrastructure projects over there. For example, they're building the roads or airports, high-speed roads, high-speed trains, something like that. I think this is one thing. And on the other hand, I think Africa also needs China to provide opportunities for them to invest in China. That is why we can see there are a lot of entrepreneurs, African entrepreneurs, coming to China to start up their business over here in China, and that, I think it's mutual benefits.
Just another information, background information I'd like to provide you with about Wei Wei here, and she is based in Guangzhou, and Guangzhou in China is the city that is known for the friendship and the cooperation between Chinese people and people from African entrepreneurs there. What is your experience working in Guangzhou? Do you have any? Have you had any previous experience with the African people now living in Guangzhou? What do they do there?
Well, Guangzhou is one of the favorite Chinese destinations for African businessmen and students over there.
Any particular reason for that?
I think it's because Guangzhou is one of the first batch of cities that opened up these markets to foreigners. So a lot of foreigners, especially Africans, they're now in Guangzhou. And according to official data, I think there were 18,000 foreigners in Guangzhou, and many of them are Africans. And actually, I just visited a Tanzania businessman who are now living in Guangzhou. And what he's doing is a little bit different from others, because we know that in China, a lot of African businessmen, they are they're selling Chinese goods back to Africa to make money, right? But this Tanzanian businessman doing just the opposite. He is exporting the Tanzania's cassava to China.
What is cassava?
Cassava is a kind of it's something like sweet potato or something. Yeah.
It's a vegetable.
Vegetable. It can make
French fries, for example.
Made to different food, and also it can even made to different kind of materials like glue or something. And Tanzania is very famous for its very huge production of cassava. And what he's doing is exporting this cassava to China. And he's just started the business 2 years ago. And now annually he's exporting 150,000 tons cassava to China, and by that, he's helping the local farmers in Tanzania to earn more money. I think that's quite important.
I'd like to borrow your wisdom here, Lindy, because I think it's a well-known fact and across the world that China can invest in Africa, but the other way around, like we were just mentioned, that is, I think, fairly new to some of our viewers. I mean, can you see it? What is your vision on that?
I mean, I think it's a good point that you make, that what Africa does need or would like from China is access to the Chinese market in terms of, you know, the goods that Africa can sell. I mean, if you look at, for instance, the United States, there's the AGOA Trade Pact, which actually does open the American market to African products, and maybe something similar to that, some kind of sort of, you know, policy document or something of that nature that could formally create an avenue for African entrepreneurs, African businesses to be able to access the Chinese market. I think that would go a long way to helping certain aspects of economic development in Africa. I mean, there's just a lot of people with many great ideas. There's many entrepreneurs, innovators, and in the same way that China is looking for markets for its products, Africans too are looking for a market for their products.
Back to you, Wei. Does that man you know about me from Tanzania, right? Does he have any troubles or difficulties to introducing his products from far away into China? Because his problem could be on the agenda of the state leaders coming to China.
I think it must be sourcing. Because I asked him the same question, and he said that it's a little bit difficult for him to find out the customers, the potential customers. So how he finds the solution is that he found a Chinese partner who worked with him, and the Chinese partner helped him to contact other consumers, buyers from China. And now this cassava and now sold to China, coming to Guangzhou ports, then distributed to many different cities like Anhui, like Qingdao, and other cities. But there's one thing I want to mention, that's why he's determined to do this business is because that's in 2013, when President Xi Jinping, Chinese President Xi Jinping took office, he paid visits to Tanzania, and that is the first African country that Xi Jinping paid visit to. And over there, they signed agreements, they signed cooperational agreements to provide duty-free policies to 97% of these goods exported from Tanzania to China. 97% of them are duty-free, and cassava is, I think cassava is half of these export goods to China, and that made him determine that, okay, we can do this because we have the policy.
So I know that the first thing, I think, even it's not the first, it must be a priority to expand the economy, to create more opportunities for local and African companies, as well as finding more channels for those products to be shipped to Chinese markets. And I know that you've brought today something you bought from your African trip. Can you show that to us?
Yeah. I really want to show this. I have a little, this is a finger puppet. Yeah. It's a toy.
You know, winter in Beijing can be really, really cold. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's why he's wearing
the only one can
sweater.
help that much.
Yeah, actually, this one is a friend gave me as a present. He bought in Zimbabwe. And what interests me is that there is a tag here. Look here. Here is the name
maybe we
of
can
this.
have our camera zoom in a little bit.
Can we see clearly? Here.
Yeah, we can try our best.
This is the
to show the camera.
zebra.
Yeah.
The name is Purity. That is the name of the zebra. But what is more interesting is on the back of this tag, you can see this is the woman that did this zebra, and this is
the maker of this specific souvenir.
Yeah, the maker of this, and her name is Wazanai.
Wazanai.
Wazanai. Yeah. She's from Zimbabwe, and actually this is a program.
Why do they feel necessary to put their names and the faces of the makers on the souvenir?
Actually, I think this is a charity program. A charity group provided, because the unemployment rate in Zimbabwe is quite high. So this charity group, they provided this kind of activities for local women so that they can earn more money. And why they choose knitting is because knitting, it just needs very simple, the simplest materials, just strings.
It requires not so many skills.
Yes, and women can do this at anywhere at any time. So that is maybe the best way for the local women to do this.
To earn a living.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some
It's
of
really
these,
impressive.
Yeah, I think it's a nice kind of gift, and I think it's a nice thing to take away from Africa. But I don't know if it.
Hello.
I don't know if the entire country can. I mean, it's cute, it's adorable, and probably if I have the opportunity to visit that souvenir store, I probably would buy one home. But if you want to save the economy, or you want to kind of improve the local economy, can you rely upon something like the souvenir industry?
I mean, the souvenir industry is important because tourism is important to Africa. So if you're going to get tourists, you're going to make products that tourists want to buy, you know. But maybe it would be better to empower small businesses rather than, you know, sort of this idea that this is a charity, you know. I worry about it specifically because, you know, as us as journalists and myself as a Black African woman, I get tired of seeing Black African women portrayed in a certain way, you know. I get tired of seeing that image of the Black African woman who's poor and always a victim of some, you know, circumstances beyond her control, whether it's the climate, whether it's political chaos or economic downfall or whatever, but she's always portrayed as someone who doesn't have a sense of agency. It would be better if this NGO or this charity would you know, empower these women to create, you know, give them proper resources then, let them knit jerseys that they can sell, you know, as fashion items that are expensive and a beautiful label, or, you know, let us start seeing African women, like for instance, I don't see African women on television that remind me of me. Do you know what I mean? I don't see this reflection of African women where they're educated, empowered, intelligent, you know, as if they don't exist, but of course they do. So sometimes these kinds of things perpetuate this idea that African women can only knit little things and hope for a few little coins. And
what do you think is the reason behind that bias on media or on?
I mean, I think this is interesting about China and Africa, is that we've both been sort of victims of bias around the portrayals of who we essentially are, you know? China, if you look at Hollywood movies, they've portrayed Chinese people in a very particular way. And very similarly with Africa. You know, Africa's been portrayed across the world throughout, you know, for many years, for decades, for centuries even, in a very particular way. And there is a resistance to seeing Africa in a different way, you know, to seeing Africans in a different way. People like the particular, they can follow that story, the poor, starving African, they know that story. And when you challenge it with like, well, actually, that African is educated, has a master's degree, or has traveled the world, or lives in a, you know what I mean? That's a little bit difficult for people to absorb. And I think the onus is on us as journalists to challenge ourselves, to tell those stories convincingly, to look for them, to spend a lot of time on them, to explore the nuances, the contradictions, instead of falling into the trap of just giving people something that is a product of stereotyping, you know, essentially.
I'm actually not pointing my finger on you, but I
But
think
you know,
we're from China, and I think we also under the same kind of media influence, and our impression about this continent, about African people, must be subject to certain bias as well. But I haven't been to Africa myself, so I can only kind of pop this question to you. Do you have, or had you had any kind of a bias before you went on this trip, but now have been corrected?
Well, but before answering that, can we go back to the zebra thing? Because there is something that I maybe not disagree with you a little bit, because I can understand that you don't want the media to, you know, let people to have the stereotype of African women, that they're poor, they have nothing, what they can do is just knitting the toys. But I think from my point of view, look, I am the fresher to Africa. This is the first time to Africa. And this kind of souvenir, of course, I will buy that. But without this tag, maybe I will not buy this. But but with this zebra will be in my memory forever. It will remind
See, for me,
me
it's
of
the
this.
tag that would make me not buy it. I would buy it just on its own because
I know,
if I had a kid, that would be a
what
cute
Great.
toy.
Now we have a
That
debate.
tag
Of course,
is what disturbs
in
me
Africa
about it.
we have women anchors so successful like you. We have women entrepreneurs. We have teachers. We have doctors. Very educated people. Very diversified professions. But I think this tag make me, that
Feel personally closer to the maker.
No, of course that is one point. But another point is this is something that made me interested in to know more about Chinese women, African women. Yeah, what do they do, despite this knitting? Do they all do like this? And yes. What are the ordinary women are doing?
So I guess
this is what I'm curious about. I think it's just a.
So your point is that this is a vast continent, and of course we've learned a lot from television, from media reports, from media coverages, including our coverage on the upcoming forum. But that is part of it. But that's another, I think, question or problem with the landscapes of this cooperation, because Africa is so huge. Even China is huge enough because it has so many provinces and so many subcultures, and so is Africa. But so. Now, when Chinese government, when China tries to kind of bring them together in one single forum, do you think that's possible for China to address so many agendas within the framework of one forum?
I mean, I think what's quite interesting is if you look at the history of the forum, so it's now 18 years old, started in 2000, and the first summit was in 2006 here in Beijing. 35 African leaders came. Then in 2015, it's in South Africa, around 48, I think, leaders came to that one. And now this is the biggest event that's ever happened for the summit. 53 African leaders, the Secretary General of the United Nations is coming, the chairperson of the African Union will be here. And it seems like this is probably one of the most important geopolitical events of 2018, just the sheer number of heads of states and all these important people that will be here. So it's clear that even if there are definitely specifics that need to be addressed with each African country, but China and Africa getting together is something that the world will pay attention to. These two areas, China and Africa as a region, as a continent, have a lot in common, and you can't talk about Africa's future without talking about China. China has become indispensable to Africa's economic growth and development for the foreseeable future. But on the other hand, you've also, there are the specifics of every country. They're not all the same. They can't be, although of course China does have an Africa policy document, one issued in 2006 and the second one in 2015. So there is one policy for Africa, but there is attention paid specifically by President Xi Jinping. As you said, he came to Tanzania in 2013. And he's visited Africa, 4 times since then, 4 tours of many different countries over and over again throughout his presidency. So we know that in those meetings and in those engagements, he does have personally tailored, sort of policies and strategies for those specific countries. But overall, if the two get together, China and Africa, it is something that's significant and that the world will pay attention to.
And one of the interesting things that the Chinese policymakers have been emphasized on is the friendship between China and Africa. And we know that about diplomacy, certainly there's an aspect about interest about materials. But why? I mean, based on your experience that in Africa, why has China been emphasizing the friendly side of this cooperation?
Friendly side?
Yes, it's a friendship. It's not just a cooperation. It's not just hard, cold kind of an exchange of interests, but it's a friendship. What is so special about this?
I think friendship is so important. I want to share with you one of my experience in Rwanda. We went to Rwanda. We were surprised by how many people can say ni hao. When we get out of the airport, a lot of people
in Chinese.
In Chinese they say ni hao.
It means hello.
Yeah, it means hello in English. And one day when we were on the streets, we were shooting on the streets, and a boy just came us to say, ni hao, and 你们从哪里?
They can recognize that you were Chinese immediately.
Yeah, and he started chatting us with Chinese, and then we learned that he's studying at a Confucius Institute. Ooh. Yes, a lot of students, African students, are studying. Yeah.
Confucius.
Maybe he just want to practice Chinese with us, but it's quite happy experience. And another experience in Rwanda is that we visited Rwanda worker. He works at a garment factory, and he lives in a very small village. And we went to his house to film some footages over there. And when we get there, it's quite dark, and we can barely see. There is no lamp over there, so we have to be very careful when we are walking. And then we heard someone from the village say, 慢慢的. In Chinese.
So
in Chinese means
that voice is warning you to slow down because
it's dark.
There's no light.
Yeah. But how can you imagine in a very tiny village, thousands of miles away from China, someone would say this is. I was so touching.
Didn't that scare you?
I didn't. I just a little bit, touching and get emotional.
Did you manage to find the source of that voice, who that person was?
It's just a young man, I think. But we didn't have a chance to ask him how you learned this word. Yeah.
So you mean friendship means better understanding each other before we do business together.
Yeah.
But can we do both simultaneously?
I think so. And I'm actually curious from your story, did you ever find that it was reciprocal or the other way around? I mean, were there Chinese people that could speak local languages of the African country that they were living in?
Can you speak in any African language?
I can speak Swahili, Hakuna Matata.
Oh, that's cheating. That one doesn't count. Everybody knows it.
But I think it's famous for me from The Lion King, the cartoon.
But you actually got the opportunity to say that to local people.
Yes, when we were in Nairobi, our driver is a Kenyan driver, and Hakuna Matata actually means don't worry, no problem, something like that. And I think he likes the word quite much.
In what kind of situation you could use that?
For example, one day we were late for an interview, and we asked him, man, can we drive faster? We're late, and say Hakuna Matata. Yeah, it's just.
That's romantic.
Yeah, romantic, maybe. And also in Swahili, I also learned a word means ni hao, means hello, is jumbo, right? Jumbo.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm just curious about the level of integration. The Chinese come into various African countries and start businesses. Some of them settle there for a very, very long time. But is there, from your experience, did you see the Chinese community, say in Rwanda or in Kenya, integrating with the African community, or learning the language? I mean, as you mentioned, there's Confucius Institutes and these opportunities that China provides Africans for learning the language and engaging. But I just wonder if it's happening on the other side.
And I think in the companies that we visited, a lot of companies provide jobs for local people. So I think there are many chances for local African workers to communicate with Chinese one. And of course, the Chinese people will learn from Swahili language. Even in Rwanda, we met with actually a manager from the Chinese company who built roads in Rwanda. And yeah,
he is Chinese.
He is Chinese, and he speaks a little bit. It's not Swahili in Rwanda. He's a special language. I can't.
Rwanda.
Yeah, in Rwanda, and he can speak a lot of the local language.
Local dialects.
Yeah, local dialects, and also the names of the roads in Rwanda is so difficult for me for us, but our Rwanda driver says, "Wow, the manager, he remembers every street's name. It's amazing because it's really difficult for Chinese people."
I can imagine.
By integration, you mean?
Yeah, I mean mixing. Just do people mix? To be honest, in Nairobi, I don't see it that much. There's a lot of Chinese people, in Nairobi, but. Often, you'll find this, the more Chinese people settle in places like Nairobi, the more you start to see shops and spaces where the signage, say, outside is completely in Chinese. There's not even an English or Swahili translation for like a shop or a little center or a business park or something like the small ones, So that space is for Chinese people. It's not part of the city of Nairobi that I navigate on a day-to-day basis.
Just out of curiosity, how many Chinese restaurants in Nairobi?
I don't know, there's plenty there.
Plenty.
I've never taken time to count, but there's many.
In Nairobi, I barely had any local food.
Oh.
Because maybe
there's no really integration.
That is probably something I wouldn't oppose.
If you can spend a week in Nairobi and never eat local and only eat Chinese food,
But
You know what
in
I mean?
Chinese restaurants, I see African customers. They come in. Yeah.
Sure, but that's the
Do they
same
laugh
thing,
at-
right? It's the Africans going to the Confucius Institute. It's the Africans
you
going
mean
to
the
the
opposite?
Chinese. So yeah, I'm saying the other side. Are the Chinese going to, like, learning the language, going to African restaurants? You know what I mean? The engagement or the friendship part, is it coming from the Chinese to
What can help
Africans?
with that? What can help to bring more Chinese people interested in learning
That's what we
African
should do in the
cultures,
future.
African way
right.
of doing things? What can help with that
I
progress?
think the thing about friendship is that in the way that it's spoken about in the China-Africa, relations, is that maybe it's a word for soft diplomacy, because obviously there's these misconceptions that China is trying to recolonize Africa. So the counter narrative,
colonize.
of course, right? I'm sorry, it's trying to colonize Africa. You know what I mean? There's this whole neo-colonial thing, or trying to just take all the resources or something like that. So the soft diplomacy word to be like, no, it's not like that. We're friends, we're brothers, is when that kind of language comes in, right? This friendship and brotherhood. But I think we need to impart meaning into it. I think that there actually has to be practical ways of engaging from a sense of friendship, and that has to come from a willingness. As much as from African people, but certainly from Chinese people, to really engage, to learn, to experience, to see Africans differently, to, you know what I mean?
Do you think this strategy, the Belt and Road Initiative, is going to help with that? Because it's probably one of the words that is mentioned the most.
Yeah. I don't think the Belt and Road Initiative's
It's not-
agenda or objective is
it's not specifically about a friendship,
uniting
but do you
people
think that could help
in
it kind of on the side, in the meantime?
Only if people wanted to. I think I think the Belt and Road Initiative will probably help a lot of things like we were talking about earlier, in terms of creating business opportunities and business
trade.
partnerships. You know what I mean, between Chinese and African, traders, or that will definitely happen, and that'll be a good thing. And in that space, we'll probably find some very great friendships will form. The way you mentioned the Tanzanian here, who has a Chinese business partner, perhaps it'll bring about more of those types of engagements. But on a personal level, on a Chinese eating in local Kenyan restaurant level, that's just a personal will. Like, people have to be personally willing to engage. They have to want to engage. It's one thing to like Africa for its beauty and its animals and even its resources, but you actually have to be like, I want to get to like and know African people. Do you know what I mean? More than just the sunsets and the giraffes, and you know what I mean?
What is the dish that you like to recommend to Weiwei to taste?
I think a lot of Chinese people who are living in Africa, they love Africa, because when we go there, what we heard a lot is, once Africa, always African. Yes, I can.
Really?
Yeah, that's because, we stayed in Africa for 1 month. At the very beginning, I was a little bit not used to that because of the weather, because of the food or something. But, after 1 month when we go back, I kind of always wanted to go back to Africa. I don't know why. I one day in my dream, I just woke up and said, I want to stay in Tanzania, something like this. And my husband just, what are you doing?
You're a journalist.
Yeah,
Suppose that your job is to answer the question.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, for example, in Rwanda, I met a man who's living in Rwanda for 30 years, and he knows everything.
From China?
Yes, he's Chinese man. But he loves Rwanda. He says he will stay here until he's old. He will not go back to China. He loves. We loved Africa.
Elizabeth, I'd have a lot to look
If
forward
I had
to.
a second chance, I would definitely go to Africa.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
good. That's good to know.
Well, I think I bring this live stream to its end. But before I do that, I think the one question I need to ask, because you're going to visit. You're going to be part of CGTN's coverage of the forum, and you'll be visiting the conference hall, and you doing presumably live stream there as well. So, what is your agenda for your coverage of the event?
I think, I must say, I went to the media center earlier today, and I was really surprised at how kitted out and how high tech and how, it's quite an immersive experience for the journalists that will go there. There's so many activities. It's really amazingly set up for a 2-day event, You would think it was like for the Olympic Games or something, but it's just for like, so that, and I thought to myself, wow, they're putting all of this effort into this meeting between China and Africa. This must really matter.
That is a way to show our goodwill.
The friendship.
Yeah, we
there
want
we go,
to
the friendship.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I'll be looking for over the next couple of days. I think it would be nice for us to get down to the meat of the the value of this relationship and what it really means for African countries. Why 53 African leaders will actually fly here for this 2-day meeting. I mean, yeah, of course, we want to know what they hope to get out of it and that kind of thing. But I think what we're seeing is that in this time of, you know, on the one end of the world, we've got unilateralism and trade friction and that kind of thing. But here, we have all these countries coming together. The one thing is that they're, you know, basically testifying to the bond that they believe they have, China and Africa, but also proving the value in multilateralism and strategic partnerships focused on mutual development. So I really want to try and understand what that means. Let's break down these words and actually see these partnerships at work. Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
We'll return to Guangzhou. Is there any fresh idea that you have?
For me, you know, I want to focus more on people-to-people exchanges, because I think what interests people, what attracts you is our daily life, how we communicate with each other. For example, in Guangzhou, we have a foreigner service center, which is very famous. It was established in 2006, and now it has it is located in a neighborhood which most Africans are living in this neighborhood. So they are inviting African volunteers to do social work over there. For example, they invite African students or businessmen to visit local people, and they hold different activities, or for example, festive celebrations to let them, you know, to get to know more about the Chinese culture and to help them to adapt to the new surroundings in Guangzhou. I think that's very interesting.
Thank you. That's a lot of input for us to digest tonight.
Thank you.
Now the forum is still 2 days away, actually just 1 day away. It starts on September the 3rd and it's going to last until September the 4th. And this program, CGTN at the table, sidebar program about the forum is going to be with you until the last day of the forum. So stay tuned to CGTN and stay tuned to CGTN's all platforms, including television channel, to find more about the Forum on China-African Cooperation. And me and Linda, we will be with you tonight at exactly the same time, and we will be we'll be in Guangzhou by then.
I will search more stories for you.
Thank you, and we'll run you package anytime you send them back.
Okay.
But don't worry, we have another reporter waiting to join us and to share with us his experience in Africa, and hopefully with that we can have more insights into these big events that are going to happen in the day that comes. And thank you for your time. Thank you for your company with us, and stay tuned to CGTN. Good night.